Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and ever since I was young, my father has always told me that he always made money. The only times he ever made money were when he invested in things that made sense to him, not things that made sense to his broker or to someone else, but things that made sense to him. And that's kind of what I've always kept in my mind when I invest in things. And I'm going to show you today what has always made sense to me. Ripple has made sense from day one. When I first got into this digital asset business, what was then called cryptocurrencies. What you're looking at on this page right here, this is the Wayback Machine. You're looking at CoinMarketCap from January 4th of 2014. I had gotten into this a few months before January of 2014, but ripples, as they called them back then, did not show up on CoinMarketCap until around January 4th of 2014. You had Bitcoin, Litecoin, you had Purecoin. You'll see all these different coins that you had on the list. Now, at some point in this time period, there was a major crash, and when the crash happened back then, I decided, well, maybe I was wrong about this whole digital asset thing. And so I'm just going to take everything that I have here and I'm just going to put it in one of these digital assets. So I went down this list, and I've told this story on this channel before. I went down this list. I went website by website. And ripples, as they called them then, it was the only place where I went and it looked like a smart group of educated people were getting together and they actually had a plan. And ever since that time, I have stayed with what we now call XRP, which is the digital asset that Ripple works on the primary use case for. I have stayed with XRP because to this day, it is the only one that makes sense in my life experience and with my background in finance and having been educated in finance and things. It's the only thing that has ever made sense. And the reason that it's always made sense is because well, I'm 46 years old now. It has a group of educated, pedigreed, not just educated, but people with Ivy League, surrounded by people with Ivy League degrees who are connected all the way to the White House, the Treasury, you name it, the heights of power around the world, these people are connected, okay? They've been able to attract all of this talent. Brad Garlinghouse, who graduated from with a Harvard MBA, all these people. And not only that, but while all these crypto anarchists for the last 2 or 3 years have been talking about how they're down with the banks and this and that, while all that's been going on, they have the anarchists and the Bitcoin maxi types, they have all been flying under a flag that basically says, hey, we don't like the government and we don't like the banks, and we've got this Bitcoin thing here or this Litecoin thing here, and we don't need them, and we're going to proceed forward in this world without them because they're bad. Well, here's the thing. I agree with those people that a lot of those institutions are bad, and what they've done to the economies of the world is bad, and they ought to be ashamed, and a lot of them should be put in jail. I agree. What I don't agree with is that you're going to proceed forward and somehow get rid of all of these powerful institutions because you have this Bitcoin thing here, this Litecoin thing. No, what I believe and what I've believed since 2013 is that XRP is the greatest digital asset ever created. It's the one. And it's the one because this is the one group of people that said, hey, we're not just going to get with these regulators, but we're going to draw talent to Ripple who either have been regulators or have been in industries that have been regulated. And then we're going to send those people out and they're going to work with these regulators from day one. And over the course of time, we will achieve our goal, which is simply to make XRP a world reserve digital currency, a bridge currency to the world. So here we go. And for those of you that haven't ever seen any of this, I'm going to show you. But this is the kind of garbage that we've seen for the last few years. I've met Anthony Pompliano, nice guy, but this whole slogan could not be more wrong, and the history is going to show it. So, long Bitcoin, short the bankers. The message there is, Bitcoin's going to take care of these bankers. No, it's not. Never was going to. You're not going, as Brad Garlinghouse said, they will bring out the tanks and the guns before that happens. But if you think that that Bitcoin is going to be the one, and I am not saying that they won't let, and I do mean let. I'm not saying that the powers that be will not let and allow Bitcoin to remain a thing, but they will control it to the extent that they want to. Okay? Doesn't matter if it's decentralized. The governments of the world can control anything they really make up their mind to control. And that's just the fact, Jack. Well, and meanwhile, you've got Trump saying, I'm not a fan of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which are not money, unregulated crypto assets. They're telling you, unregulated crypto assets, Facebook's Libra virtual currency, it'll have very little standing or dependability. If any of these companies want to become a bank, then they must seek new banking charter, And he says, we have one real currency in the USA, and it's stronger than ever, both dependable and reliable. It's by far the most dominant currency anywhere in the world, and it will always stay that way. So, folks, here's how this all lays out, and I'm going to prove it to you today. The way this lays out is they will bring out the tanks and the guns. What you're going to have is central bank. The countries of the world will have their own digital assets, which are stable assets, but you have to have a bridge for those assets. And because Ripple and the people at Ripple went about this in the smart way and went to the regulators from day one, which was the whole point of why I chose to put my investment with XRP. Because they did that, anybody with a half a brain that's paying attention will see how this landscape is coming out. And I'm about to show you right here. This article, central banks recommended to ban stablecoins. And here's where it says the Financial Standards Stability Board outlined 10 recommendations to central banks for regulating stablecoins, including outright prohibition. The FSB is an international entity that provides suggestions on the global financial system. It comprises central banks and finance ministries from major G20 economies. The recommendations are to be presented before an audience of G20 countries and reference major stablecoins, including USDT, USDC, TUSD, PAX, and DAI. Given the market's heavy reliance on stablecoin, a ban could mean disaster for Bitcoin and the broader cryptocurrency market. Now, in the short run, if this happened, it would probably make the entire cryptocurrency market go down, including XRP. That's not relevant, folks. What's relevant is what Ripple has been working on for the last, since 2012 or so. They've been working with these regulators. I've shown you this before. It is not a coincidence that this makes its way into a World Economic Forum document that's put out by the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where they say crypto assets designed for inter and intrabank payments and settlements. We've also seen Christine Lagarde say it's not Bitcoin, it's not Ethereum. Meanwhile, most of them won't say Ripple or XRP, but we know that Ripple has been working with regulators from day one. How many times have we heard it? And for those of you that are new to this, watch what I'm about to show you, because Ripple has done nothing but spent the last 3 to 7 years working with regulators so that XRP can be the bridge currency to the world. This is from Ripple back January 21st, 2020. Hello, Davos. Members of Ripple's leadership team are at World Economic Forum this week, meeting with global business and regulatory leaders. And then we have this from Ben Lawsky, who created the Bit license in New York and then went to, I believe, Ripple's board of directors.
Lots of institutions that are just, in my opinion, chomping at the bit to dive into all this, but they need to understand what the regulatory framework is for them. It's too much risk on the one hand, to really dive in until they hear from the regulators, these are the rules of the game. And I think in New York, proof is in the pudding. We've seen big institutions diving in because they know what the rules are because of the BIT license, and because they know the companies that have the BIT license can be trusted. They have a regulator that comes in and watches over periodically what they do. So I think, one, we'll see more regulatory clarity. I think that comes in the next 1 to 2 years, hopefully one. And then second, I think the level at where we're regulating is probably going to rise. I remember being in an elevator sometime in late 2015. A gentleman who I'll politely say was probably of the libertarian streak, shall we say. And he got in my face a little bit in an elevator after a speech I'd given.
Okay, that's enough of that one. But I'm just going to take you through and show you some of the different people from Ripple who have been pounding this regulatory drum and doing nothing but working with regulators since this whole thing started. Remember, Greg Kidd, who was one of the first 10 people at Ripple, he said the first thing they did is went to the Treasury of the United States with what they had. And then this was a picture of Ben Lawsky and Stuart Alderati at Swell talking to each other, regulatory outlook for digital assets. And then there's this. This is Steve Mnuchin.
First of all, let me be clear. We very much support financial innovation, and anything that lowers payment processing costs, especially across border, is something that's very important. We discussed that a lot at the G7. The president has raised concerns about cryptocurrencies, bitcoins in general. I absolutely share those concerns. At Treasury, we've been doing work at this for over the last year. We've put together a working group. And there was a clear agreement today from all the G7 finance ministers and central bank governors that Libra in particular raises some very significant concerns, and cryptocurrencies more broadly. And that before any of us let these go through, we're going to make sure that those concerns are satisfied.
All right, so Steve Mnuchin's telling you. Here's Brad Garlinghouse. This is from July 18th, 2019.
Regulation look like to continue to spur innovation, but also protect what I would imagine are going to be increasing numbers of people and institutions that use these technologies?
Well, I think that's where Secretary Mnuchin was coming from, and that we need regulatory clarity. I mean, even what you saw from Facebook with Libra, the white paper articulates a plan of going to Switzerland to have it regulated out of Switzerland. And although they haven't spoken to the Swiss regulator, I think that was kind of the right thought of, hey, there's regulatory clarity in Switzerland. And I think the U.S. in the late 90s created clarity around how the internet should be regulated. And so I think the same thing can happen around blockchain. There are some areas where there's not certainty, but the Secretary is right that at the core, the fundamental financial regulations around KYC or Know Your Customer or AML, anti-money laundering, there has to be a level playing field both for new entrants as well as legacy entrants. And I think that's really, that I think is a fair playing field for everyone to play within.
So you're in a position to tell, so give us a peek at what you consider to be a worst case scenario. What potentially happens if you move too fast and break too many things with money versus just with data?
Well, I think you see that, and the reason why it's called terrorism financing and money laundering is, you know, when we lower restrictions, we lower regulatory dynamics around financial transactions, you find that money flows to illicit activities. You know, frankly, even the earliest days of crypto were born of things like Silk Road. The good news is we've come a long way from Silk Road and those illicit use cases, and we're talking about solving real problems for real customers. And, you know, there's still lots of speculation in the crypto market, that's clear. But I think as you and I, John, spoke about on CNBC a year ago, the long-term value of any cryptocurrency is going to be derived from the utility it delivers. And I think as time goes by, you're seeing more and more real-world use cases and real utility. And I think it's good to go beyond the hype. Even this Libra white paper, to some degree, as Morgan pointed out, we're a long way from actually knowing what that really looks like and what that really may be, because it's, you know, about a year away is their estimation of when it might launch.
Okay, so that was Brad Garlinghouse. And now we have Marcus Treacher. This is from Stephen from the Bull Dia.
Marcus, working with regulators must be a key part of your development.
It is, yes. So we're creating an internet of value. That's our mission for payments and transacting worldwide. To make that happen, you have to have governance as well.
By the way, while you're watching this, you'll notice in the top left corner when they zoom back out, it says New Global Order.
So although the core magic dust in Ripple is blockchain technology, crypto technology. The real enabler has been creating a governance body, which we call the RippleNet Committee. And that is a member of leading banks, which are voted onto a governing body with a formal membership structure. It's a scheme, and it's the first one to be created internationally since SWIFT was created back in 1974. And that's really enabled us to engage with regulators, given us the kind of like gravitas within the industry, so that we are not just a technology innovation company, we're also a credible, highly credible, effective community for cross-border payments in a whole new model. But you have to create that governance body, you have to create that engagement within which you can connect into the regulatory world. And that involves working with the banks and the lead organizations worldwide to form that structure. And that's how we've really got traction globally.
Okay, I'm going to move along. And then we have this from Dilip Rao. Let me back up here.
Well, I have to tell you that when I was running for Ripple for the last 3 years, the APAC MENA business, and MENA has been the fastest adopter of technology from Ripple to date. So we have signed banks in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, in Oman, possibly in Kuwait shortly. So the appetite for embracing Ripple's DLT technology for cross-border payments, enormous interest. So the enthusiasm of the regulators, the central banks, to also encourage the use of Ripple technology to build new infrastructure for payment rails, not just within the country but across the GCC, I think augurs really, really well for the adoption of the latest technology in this region.
So there you go. You heard it from Dilip Rao. Now here is David Schwartz himself.
Adoption is uncertainty. People don't know whether the things they're doing are legal or illegal. It's not that the existing laws are bad. It's just that we don't know which laws apply and how they apply and when they apply, what they apply to, who they apply to. There's different laws in different jurisdictions, and these things are all global. There's only a small number of ways to fix that. You could either just not have any adoption. You could fight it out in court and hope that you're right, that what you did was legal, that what you guessed the law was correct. But obviously, the better way to do it is to engage with regulators.
Yeah. So there's from David Schwartz, engage with regulators. And here we have Cigar Sarvatra from Ripple.
Ripple employs someone like me so that we can work and engage with central banks and policymakers. So I, for example, have already engaged with about 30 plus central banks in Middle East and Asia Pacific, working on the regulatory side, policy frameworks, and then educating them, collaborating them wherever required. What we are also seeing, especially in these...
I don't have to go any further than that on that one. You see that. And here is the Ripple's global head of government relations. Does your crypto or your digital asset have one of those that's working on their primary use case?
I'd love to hear your perspective on some of the more positive developments that you've seen over the past year. And I'm curious to hear how Blockchain Association has worked on those positive developments.
When a new technology comes along, it takes time for the regulations to keep pace with technology. And we find ourselves in sort of this square hole round peg situation, especially when it comes to dealing with securities laws and when they apply to a given token transaction.
So that's all you have to see of that. You can see that she's having a whole discussion about regulations and regulatory environment. Here's Ryan Zagone from September 25th, 2018. He's at the round table for the Library of Congress.
Using blockchain and crypto assets to improve cross-border payments, taking payments from, say, 2 to 4 days down to a few seconds at a much lower cost. Looking at the token taxonomy topic, I want to expand the lens out some from ICOs to broader crypto. It's a broader world than just ICOs, and the importance of looking at this entire sector. So we see recognition globally that blockchain and crypto assets will play a pivotal role in the next generation of finance and our national economies. And there are countries racing to provide regulatory certainty so they can be the winner in this race. They can essentially take a stake as the global capital of finance, which is now in the US, moving elsewhere. We're seeing national holistic frameworks in other countries designed to drive the adoption of this tech.
You can see Ryan Gazagone was working on this for Ripple. And then here we've got Chris Larson himself.
Hey, it's Reinhard Kate, and welcome to another episode of the Ripple Drop. This month, we're talking to Chris Larson and Michelle Bond. How do blockchain and digital assets help build out the Internet of Value?
It's an infrastructure for moving value around the world, and that's both the distributed ledgers as well as the interoperability layer, ILP, for example. The second part of it is digital assets. Those currencies are going to be extremely important for reducing liquidity costs and sort of just greasing the wheels of how all these other things of value, dollar, yen, RMB, euro, but they need a digital asset to enable that easy translation from one thing of value to another thing of value. So we think they supplement the global economy in key ways.
That innovation that you've described from blockchain and digital assets, what kind of regulatory clarity do we need to get there?
The key thing is regulatory clarity, not necessarily less regulation. In fact, we would advocate that the best system is going to be one that takes into consideration consumer protection, a nice environment for innovators, that they can feel comfortable and invest in these things.
You can see they've been on this from day one. And then finally, here's Brad Garlinghouse when he was interviewed by Julia Chatterley.
Why is 2020 that year, to your point, that pivotal moment where we look at the utility value here, perhaps, and differentiate from the speculative?
I think one of the reasons why 2020 will be very important is that regulatorily, that's a word, the clarity is getting better. And I mean that globally. Countries like Singapore and Thailand and Switzerland and Japan. I think the U.S. has still an opportunity to do more there, but I think we will probably see that in 2020, and I think that helps catapult the whole industry. I also think you've gone from an industry that has been a little bit in the shadows and in a history of crypto.
Very much in the shadows.
Yeah, I remember actually, you and I were both at Davos, and someone early on in my arrival there, someone was like, crypto's still a bad word here. I was like, and
it's a misunderstood word.
It is, and I think a lot of what I'm doing and a lot of what I did in Davos is meeting with regulators, meeting with very senior people at banks, and explaining to them how crypto can be used, specifically XRP can be used to solve a real problem, not to circumvent regulation, not to circumvent any government. And I think once people understand that, they very quickly become disarmed. It's no longer a bad word.
Right. So I think that you should, but at this point, totally get it. And if you don't, here's what I would encourage you to do. Because right now, XRP, I'm 10,000 times more bullish on XRP than I was in 2013, because I have watched what the company that these people have put together and what they have done and accomplished since that time. And it is unbelievable the place we are in. But if you doubt me, I challenge you, because you will not find it. You go down this list and do what I did in 2013. Go website by website. And I want you to listen, because don't think, and look, we're in the year. I think they're calling it 2020, the year of the digital asset, because they know the final regulations are coming down. So don't get, one of my favorite lines from the movie Hoosiers, the basketball movie, is when the coach tells the guys to do the picket fence, and he says, "Don't be caught watching the paint dry." Well, that's what I would say to you, is don't be caught watching the paint dry. And what that means is, don't find yourself stuck in one of these digital assets that thinks they're going to have some kind of, the investors think they're going to have some kind of revolution that's going to put these powers that be out to pasture, because it's not going to happen. XRP is the one, and it's been the one since 2013, from what I can tell, because of the way they've approached it as grown-ups, not as children who think they're going to have a revolution because they don't like the big bad bank. It's time to grow up and understand that this is a big boy world we're in. And you got to have your big boy pants on to be in the big boy investing world. And big boys engage with regulators. They don't try to say they're going to be down with the banks, and we're going to somehow put the banks out of business. It's not going to happen. I'm a digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button. Tell your friends and family that there will be no down with the banks. There will be an up with XRP, though. Thank you for listening.